Every Thursday at midnight, the town empties. It doesn't matter if it's a thunderstorm or if frost webs the lawns like broken glass. It doesn't matter if people are sick or if children are fast asleep in their beds. When the church bell a mile away chimes 12, every single front door opens at the same time. Hinges groan, porch lights click on, shadows spill across perfect lawns, and then they all step outside. I mean everyone. Men in work boots, women in housecoats, teenagers wiping sleep from their eyes, mothers with infants tucked against their shoulders, people you'd think too fragile to even stand in the cold, lined up on the grass like they've been rehearsing it their entire lives. They're silent, still, each facing the same direction, the black stretch of county road where pavement fades into the hills. Street lamps glow an anemic yellow above them, buzzing loud as if they're afraid of the hush everyone else holds. The first Thursday I saw it, my stomach folded in on itself. I was standing at my window, watching the town I just moved into transform beneath the stars. Nobody knocked on my door. Nobody told me what to do. I just pressed my forehead against the glass and prayed I wasn't supposed to join them. At exactly 12:07, every streetlight flickered once, and in perfect unison, the town tilted their heads forward. Just slightly, like a bow. Not reverence, not prayer, recognition. I never slept that night. I watched until they went back inside, until their doors shut again without a word. And for the next week, I told myself I'd imagine it. Sleep deprivation, moving stress, a small-town ritual I didn't understand. But then the next Thursday came, and the night after that. And last night, I was done pretending. I opened my door, and I asked them why.
I'd only been in the town for 3 weeks when I noticed how carefully people avoided small talk after sunset. In the daylight, Willow Creek could have been the set of an old postcard. Red brick storefronts, an ice cream parlor that proudly dated back to the 1950s, a hardware shop where the cashier still offered to carry bags to your car, the kind of place people idealize when they talk about moving away from big cities. I moved here for peace, for safety, for the feeling that bad news never quite makes it past the county line. The realtor smiled too brightly when she slid me the keys. "Lovely neighborhood," she said. "They take care of each other here." I thought she just meant cookouts, borrowed sugar, neighborly gossip. I didn't realize it meant something much heavier. The truth revealed itself in passing gestures. Mr. Harker across the street asked what night I planned to take my trash to the curb. When I shrugged, he frowned. "Best to handle that Wednesday afternoon," he said firmly. "Before, Thursday." My mail carrier, a woman with 2 weathered braids, wouldn't set my new mailbox without muttering, "Make sure you keep the porch bulbs fresh, spare box in the linen closet, don't cut corners." When I asked what she meant, she only shook her head. "You'll understand soon enough."
Even casual errands were laced with warning. The grocer politely reminded me, "Close curtains Thursday evening." Too politely. His hand trembled against the register as he said it. At first, I thought it was some church tradition. Maybe the whole block kept vigil for a local saint or an old memorial. I Googled festivals, charity nights, candlelight rituals, anything that could explain why Thursday came with warning baked into people's tone. Nothing came up. Then came Thursday, midnight. I pressed my face to the window and watched every door open at once. I told myself, fine, small town, strange practices, don't make it bigger than it is. But I couldn't ignore the way my stomach knotted, or the way Mr. Harker's eyes snapped toward my window, like he knew I was still inside while everyone else was standing where they belonged. When the streetlights flickered, I swear, for the first time, I felt the ground move under my feet. Not a tremor, more like breath, as if something larger than the town had just noticed me.
The second Thursday, I told myself I'd ignore it. Close the blinds, crank up the TV, and wait out whatever faintly religious thing the neighborhood was up to. Curiosity is the sharpest hook, though,
and by 11:55 I was already standing at the window, hands clutching the frame as if I were bracing against the storm. At midnight, right on schedule, every door opened. Not staggered, not casual, but exactly together. Hinges like a choir, bolts sliding with the same rhythm, porch lights flaring pale yellow across the block. The sound echoed strangely, as if the air had known the note beforehand. The people poured out again. Mothers swaying their babies half asleep, teenage sons rubbing their eyes, old couples leaning on canes, all moving without speaking, without hesitation, falling into place on each square of lawn. I squinted through the glass. No one looked happy about it. Their faces wallowed in exhaustion, like they'd already spent the night pretending to sleep and were simply dragging themselves into another kind of work. They fixed their stares down the road again, posture severe, unmoving. I stood there, insane with the temptation to crack the door, to shout, "What are you doing?" My throat tightened, the words nearly escaped, but something in the air pressed against me. The silence wasn't hollow. It throbbed faintly, like static beneath drywall. At exactly 12:07, the streetlights flickered. Same single pulse, and the town dipped their heads together, like they were nodding to something just out of my sight. This time, though, the motion didn't end there.
My neighbor, Mr. Harker, held his head bowed 2 seconds longer than the others. His knees buckled slightly, and when he straightened again, his lips weren't sealed. They moved. I couldn't hear what he whispered, but the look on his face was pale with pleading, not prayer, begging. I backed away from the window, chest tight. Suddenly, the whole ritual looked less like homage and more like survival, like a leash. The worst part was the sensation that pricked my spine, the certainty that if I cracked the door even an inch, they'd all turn, in unison, and glare at me for interrupting something weightier than tradition. So I stood in my darkened room until their necks rolled upright again, until they shuffled back indoors like puppets whose strings had been temporarily freed. Back inside, my clock read 12:21. Their doors shut quietly, one after the other. The silence did not leave. It seemed to coil around me, patient. I didn't sleep that night either. The shadows in my walls hummed faintly, keeping me wired awake until morning light finally broke across the blinds. And all I could think was that next Thursday, if I didn't join them, I might be the only one purposely absent. And I wasn't sure this town, or whatever was watching from beyond, would forgive me for it.
By the third Thursday, fear had twisted into something worse, anticipation. I couldn't shake the memory of Mr. Harker's lips moving when nobody else dared, begging something unseen. The look on his face was raw enough to keep me pacing my house for days. Curiosity clawed until my stomach soured, until I decided that whatever happened outside those doors, I needed to see it with my own eyes, not through a layer of glass. At 11:50, I killed every light and sat at the edge of my couch, shoes laced, jacket pulled tight. The house itself seemed to pulse faintly, like the drywall was trying to hum through my skin. By the time the clock struck 12, I was already at the front door. I opened it with the rest of them. I swear my hand didn't move. Something in the air seemed to open every door at once. Hinges groaned, bolts slid, and the cold night air slipped across my face. That was when the silence hit me for real. Behind glass, it had felt heavy. Outside, it was smothering. Crickets were gone, wind had no will. Even the rumbling highway beyond town vanished as though the world's volume had been throttled down to nothing. Neighbors filed neatly across their lawns. I mimicked them nervously, shuffling to the edge of my driveway. Mr. Harker's eyes flicked to me once, measuring, then softened a fraction, like he approved that I was finally obeying. Every other gaze fixed down the main road, into the void beyond the last street lamp. The silence flowed around us. I tried to focus, but it was like standing in the middle of a pressure drop before a storm. My jaw ached, ears popped every few seconds. chest tight with the certainty that something was moving in the distance. 12:07.
The streetlights overhead gave their pulse, one unified blink. Every head bowed forward in eerie unison. My body followed before my mind ordered it. A tug, subtle but undeniable, bent my neck down. It felt like I'd leaned against a giant hand, invisible and impatient. The ground beneath the road groaned faintly, like bedrock was shifting. From the hills beyond, a low moan lumbered through the dark. Not wind, not steel. It sounded like the earth itself trying to breathe. Beside me, Mr. Harker whispered again. Though he barely moved his lips, his words fell into the air like crumbs into water, vanishing instantly, swallowed by silence. I tried to catch what he said, but couldn't. My mind, though, filled the gap with the awful suspicion that maybe he wasn't really speaking English anymore. Maybe he wasn't speaking human. The moment ended as suddenly as it began. Streetlights steadied, heads rolled upright. People shuffled back into their homes, slow but obedient, clutching themselves like damp laundry. No one spoke. No one knocked on my door afterward to explain. But when I shut my own door, the last door on the street, I swear I felt breath behind me. Warm, enormous, sighing through the frame as if disappointed I hadn't bowed soon enough. And for the first time since moving here, I realized that Thursday wasn't ritual for tradition's sake. It was containment. Something bigger than the town was watching, and the people knew exactly what would happen if anyone slipped.
The next morning, I found Mr. Harker waiting on my porch with 2 mugs of coffee and eyes that looked as if he hadn't blinked all night. He didn't bother with small talk. He didn't ask how I slept. He simply set 1 mug on the railing and said, "I saw you step out last night. That's good. That's safer." I tried to laugh, tried to pry some normalcy out of him. "So you are going to tell me what this is? A tradition? A holiday? Whatever it is that makes this place look like a horror movie Thursday at midnight?" His eyes hardened. "Don't call it that," he said sharply. "Don't call it anything, really. Just do it." He leaned close, his voice lowering into gravel. "There are rules." He said it like scripture. "Number 1, you never stay inside past 12. If the rest are out, you go out. Even if you're sick, even if you're dying. You stand, because if you don't, it notices the absence." The absence of me? My throat tightened. He nodded. "Of you, of anybody. It counts. Thursday is for counting." I tried to laugh again, but it caught in my teeth. "You hear yourself? You sound insane." His hand shook around his mug. "Better insane than gone." He swallowed, forcing the words out like medicine. "Rule 2. Never look back up the road. That's where it comes from. Our job is to face forward. Nod, acknowledge, let it pass. Nothing more." The way he paused made my skin crawl. "And never," his jaw stiffened, "never open your mouth to ask why. The questions are invitations." I scoffed, uneasy. "Invitations? The thing at the edge doesn't need doors." He leaned so close I could smell burnt coffee on his breath. "It needs acknowledgement. A name. If you give it even a crack, it takes." His eyes burned into mine. "Don't let it take." He turned to leave, then stopped at the base of my porch steps. Without looking back, he added quietly, "Every family on this street has lost someone to it. My boy thought rules didn't matter. He asked once, even whispered, and now there's a headstone for him that doesn't match the coffin beneath." Then he walked away, cradling his mug like it was the only weight keeping him upright. I stood frozen on my porch. The coffee he'd left for me had cooled to sludge, steam gone. I didn't touch it. All I could think all day was how his voice broke when he used one word: invitations.
By Friday, the rules clung to me like smoke. I couldn't stop hearing Mr. Harker's voice. Questions are invitations. His warning pulsed behind my eyes each time I blinked. So I drove into town and started digging. The local library was a converted church. Its stained glass windows filtered pale light onto rows of dust-glutted shelves. The clerk greeted me politely, but when I asked for Old Town records, her expression slid into something paper-thin. She gestured reluctantly to a basement archive and said, "Just don't check out anything dated near Thursdays." The files weren't neat. Stacks of yellowed papers slouched in milk crates, microfilm reels sat rusting, parish notices folded and refolded until they resembled fragile origami. But the pattern leapt out quickly. Thursdays. A newspaper clipping from 1924 described an unusual silence that fell across Willow Creek each week. Another, dated 1947, reported the absence of birdsong for exactly 14 minutes and recommended continued compliance. Compliance. Such a bureaucratic word for a ritual. A 1962 church bulletin read, "Neighbors, please remember, keep faith during the appointed hour. Eyes forward, no questioning God's winds." By 1979, the language turned harsher. Township notice. Thursday's custom are mandatory. Participation ensures communal safety. Do not neglect your role. The clerk tried not to watch me as I copied notes. Her fingers tapped against the counter in nervous time. When I asked casually if she'd ever wondered where the tradition began, her mouth pinched shut like a knot. She shook her head fast, too fast, as if refusing even that tiny trespass into curiosity. Later, I stopped by the diner. Greasy menus, tired waitresses, coffee thin as rainwater. But in a back corner, a corkboard displayed old photographs. Most looked benign. Little league teams, harvest festivals, fireworks. One, though, pulled me in. An entire row of townsfolk lined the main street at night. Dozens of them, standing stock still, hats in hand, eyes fixed down the road. The caption said only 1935, Vigil. The waitress caught me staring and gently but firmly plucked the photo off the corkboard. "Not for display anymore," she muttered. "Management prefers we keep history light." I mumbled thanks and left cash, but I couldn't shake the chill down my bones. People had been doing this every Thursday for nearly a century. Longer, maybe. Calling it compliance, calling it faith, and yet never naming what they were all facing. The rituals weren't superstition. They were survival. And now I was part of it.
The following Thursday afternoon, I found an envelope wedged tight under my front door. No return address, no handwriting on the outside, just my name, blocky and mechanical, like it had been stamped instead of written. Inside was a single page of pale blue paper, folded twice. Not official letterhead, not friendly notes, just a list. Community guidelines. Thursday. 1. Open your door promptly at midnight. 2. Step outside with the others. 3. Stand at the edge of your property. 4. Face forward only. 5. When the streetlights flicker, bow your head until it stabilizes. 6. Do not speak. Do not whisper. 7. Do not attempt to count the time aloud. 8. If you hear your name spoken, do not look for the source. 9. When your neighbors return indoors, follow them. 10. Never, under any circumstance, ask why. At the bottom, in smaller print, a final line. Remember, compliance keeps us safe. My stomach dropped as I scanned the rules again. They weren't meant to be ceremonial. They read like instructions for a drill or an emergency procedure everyone was expected to memorize and carry out flawlessly. I slipped the sheet back into the envelope and checked the street. Nobody visible, no kids on bikes, no dogs being walked. Yet I couldn't shake the certainty that someone was still watching, confirming I'd read it.
When I showed the page to Mr. Harker later, his eyes flared and he hissed, "Don't wave it around, burn it. We don't keep them." "Why not?" I asked, testing him, the word why hanging heavy in the air. His jaw tightened. "Because paper remembers, and that thing doesn't need help remembering us." That night, I dreamed of the rules, recited in my own voice, over and over, until it sounded less like compliance and more like a prayer. By the time the next Thursday rolled around, I had read the rule sheet so often I could recite it without glancing. The words chased me through the day. Midnight, stand, bow, silence. 10 commandments etched into the marrow. But repetition breeds rebellion. The more often I mouthed the orders, the more an itch grew in my head. A stubborn splinter. Why? What could possibly demand this kind of obedience? What held hundreds of people upright every Thursday under buzzing streetlights, heads lowered, lips sealed? What monster feeds on bowing silence and not so quiet desperation? I told myself I'd follow the script perfectly. I'd step out, I'd stand in the line of pale-faced neighbors, I'd nod with the rest. But when the flicker came, I'd do one thing different. I'd ask, even quietly, even under my breath, midnight. The doors opened, bodies shuffled. The air fell into that horrific hush where even the insects seemed absent. My heart battered my ribs as I joined the line, shoulder to shoulder with Mr. Harker, our shadows stretched long down the asphalt. At 12:07, the lamps blinked. My neck dropped forward in reflex, hands curled, silence thickened, and I whispered it. Just one word, why?
No one turned toward me, but every head shivered as if caught in the same gust of wind. My own voice didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. It was as though the silence had scooped it up, chewed it, and sent it down the street like bait. Something answered. Not sound, not quite. More like the air bending against my skin. An invisible hand dragging nails down my arms. The ground groaned. The moan I'd only faintly heard before surged, closer, as if some tremendous shape had pivoted its ear toward me. Beside me, Mr. Harker trembled violently. He didn't dare look at me, but his lips moved enough for me to catch the plea. You shouldn't have said that. The silence fractured. A ripple of vibration coursed through the crowd, synchronized like heartbeat. Every neighbor's mouth opened wide, not to scream, but to make a sound my ears couldn't parse. The vibration pushed through my skull anyway, teeth aching, vision stuttering as though someone were rewinding reality a half second behind itself. Then, mercifully, the lamp steadied. People's heads rose. Doors called them home again. The line dissolved, parents tugging kids inside, old women hobbling to thresholds, bodies dispersing with desperate haste. I stumbled back over my own porch, shaking so hard I almost dropped my keys. But I wasn't imagining it. The front door exhaled warmth that wasn't mine, as if something had leaned in behind me when I crossed the threshold. And for the first time, I understood a truth worse than obedience. They weren't bowing to keep themselves humble. They were bowing to keep something focused elsewhere. And I had just reminded it that curiosity meant invocation. I didn't leave the house for 2 days. Not for groceries, not for mail, not even to pull the rule sheet off the fridge. But hiding doesn't buy anything in Willow Creek. The silence seeped under the door, insinuating itself into the tick of my wall clock, curling through the pipes. At night, I heard footsteps on the porch that left no prints in the morning. My name rustled faintly behind the hum of the refrigerator, spoken in a voice that almost, but not quite, belonged to me. On Sunday afternoon, I caved. I walked to Mr. Harker's front door, knocked once. He answered instantly, as if he'd been waiting with his hand already on the knob. His face had gone yellow with dread. You asked, didn't you? I couldn't bring myself to lie. My nod was answer enough. He pushed me inside, bolted the door, and pulled thick curtains across the windows. The living room smelled of old coffee and salt. Chalk lines scored the doorframe. "You need to know what you did," he said. And then he told me.
Decades back, longer than any record admitted, the town had been host to something. Soldiers once camped east of here whispered about the Thursday marches. Farmers told their children to cover their ears after dark. When the power grid came to Willow Creek, the ritual crystallized into strict order. Lights on, doors open, silence obeyed. "It doesn't live here," Harker explained, gripping the arms of his chair like railing. "It passes through, every 7 days, just as sure as the moon. If we bow, we're ignored. If we stand still, it doesn't step closer." His voice wavered. "But if anyone asks why, then it knows we're human enough to break. Breaking is interest. Interest invites." "That's insane," I whispered. "You're saying the whole town plays statue just so some thing won't notice us?" His eyes met mine with terrible pity. "No, so it won't take us. Curiosity is worship. It loves worship." I tried to breathe. His words sat like teeth in my ribs. "What happens if it takes someone?"
This time he didn't answer. He simply lifted a framed photo off the mantel. A boy, 14 maybe, with Harker's eyes. The dust line around the frame suggested it hadn't been touched in years. "My son asked once," he said hollowly. That was enough. Suddenly, I knew what the careful silences in everyone's face meant. Whole branches of families had been cut out, neatly, without funerals. Questions are invitations. Invitations are sacrifices. And now, I was marked. I stumbled back into the street after, bile in my throat, body weak as paper. The town looked ordinary. Lawnmowers, children chalking shapes on sidewalks, someone grilling hot dogs 3 houses down. Normal at a glance. But every eye that happened to wander to me carried the same shadowed sympathy. They knew. They knew what Harker had just admitted. They knew who had asked, and that night, when I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, the silence gathered until I heard it. My name, whispered from the drywall, in a voice a shade too amused to be mine.
Thursday returned faster than it had any right to. Days blurred like the town refused to give me time to think. When midnight came, I already stood by the door, sweat slick on my palms, rule sheet crumpled in one fist as if paper could fend off something older than time. The doors opened again, hinges in choir, porch lights snapping into vigilance. We filed out together, each of us into our squares of grass. But the instant my shoe touched my lawn, I felt it, that subtle angle of every eye. They knew I was the one who had asked. They didn't need to say it. The air groaned around me, heavy with judgment. I tried to hold still. I tried to pretend I was steady as the others, but when the street lamps flickered at 12:07, my head bowed slower, just a second late. And in that second, the silence buckled. Something noticed. The quiet swelled into vibration, rattling my ribs, stealing my breath. From the hills came movement, and this time I saw hints of it. The ground leaning inward, shadows stretching longer than night should allow. Not footsteps, shift marks, like the world was shrugging something vast across its shoulders. All around me, neighbors trembled, lips pressed tight against terror, but their eyes begged me, "Don't move." I failed them. My mouth opened, not to ask why, not again, just to breathe, just to say anything. But the effort alone was enough. The silence bit down on my voice and pulled it out of me like string. I heard myself speaking from beyond the edge of the street. My tone, my phrasing, my voice, only too loud and too late. The thing out there had learned me. The street lamps flared once more, sickly orange, then steadied. But no one stood at ease. They filed back indoors, doors bolting fast, eyes refusing to meet mine.
Mr. Harker paused only once and whispered, "It'll follow you now, every week." And he left me to the night. Back inside, my house felt gutted. Every room hummed softly, appliances crooning wrong notes. The reflection in the dark window pane grinned a half-beat too late. I sat at my desk and uncrumpled the rule sheet. 10 rules had been printed, but at the bottom, new writing had appeared. Sharp black ink in a hand I knew wasn't mine. Rule 11. When you hear your story told, listen carefully. Pass it on. Make them follow the rules. My stomach iced over. Was I writing it down? Was something else?
And then I understood the real tradition. The truth wasn't just about standing outside or bowing in silence. It was about obedience, spreading endlessly, carried mouth to mouth, ear to ear, story to story. Which means you, right now, reading these words, hearing them in your head, you're part of it too. So follow the rules, keep the lights on, stand when the others do, bow when the lamps flicker, and above all, don't ask why, because asking is how it finds you. And if you think you're safe because this is just a story, you're wrong. Stories are invitations. You opened this one. You listened. Now you have one last task. For me, for yourself, for all of us still standing at midnight. Bell. Subscribe to the rules. Share them. Keep them alive. Pass this story on so the silence knows you're obeying. Like it. Spread it. Do your part. Because if you don't, then the next voice you hear whispering your name in the dark won't be your own.